on here.
All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It's Monday. It's an Arlen Grossman Monday. You don't see Arlen on your screen. You will in a second. He had to get up for a quick break. I'm not sure quite what he was doing. Oh, there he is. Let's get to Arlen as well. I don't want to show the screen. See, I have so many. This is so confusing for me, Arlen. I have so many. There it is. I think the problem is I have just Hal and guests, no slide deck. I should just take out the no slide deck. Obviously, if it's just Hal and guest, there's no slide deck. How you doing, Arlen? How's your weekend going? Or how did it go?
Like on the East Coast where you live, Maryland and all that, but it was nice here. We're expecting maybe some rain coming, but that's been pretty normal around here these days. So that would be no surprise, but I'm just doing fine. Thank you. And then hello to all you hundreds or thousands of people out there.
Your lips to somebody's ears, that would be nice, Arlen. Well, maybe we'll get there one of these days. I'm hopeful. Thought leader, pundit, Arlen with us. And we started with just a moment where you were muted, Arlen, but we got almost everything you said there. And you were mentioning, I guess, the rain. But one thing I remember about my very pleasant 9 years in the Monterey area is there's not a lot of variation in temperature or weather. I mean, the climate is pretty much steady throughout the year. You don't have like you do in, say, the Sierras, where you might have well over 100-degree variation from the summer to the winter. It gets over 100 degrees, in Redding, and it gets below zero as well in the California desert. But
nothing like the East Coast.
Nothing like these. Well, but in the mountains of California, you're going to have even greater variation, perhaps, than the East Coast, I'm going to guess. But in Monterey, the hottest it ever gets, if it's 80, it's really, really hot, and it rarely gets below 40 every now and then.
I think that it's mostly in the 60s around the summer, the warmest time, and maybe the 50s during the coldest time. You have occasional variations, but yeah, it is a very moderate climate, which I like, especially after spending a few months in Vermont, where the weather can change drastically from time to time. Me personally, I like the moderate temperature.
But you're rarely in Vermont over the winter, right? Or never, when it actually does get quite chilly.
We try to leave after Thanksgiving. So it gets cold. You might get a little bit of snow, but yeah, we're not there for the worst of it.
So, Arlen, I'm going to have to, and I hope I may be getting a little bit of overlap there from your speaker. Let me work on that as well. But you're just going to have to bear with me as I go over just briefly what happened on Friday. I made a little bit of a mistake. I was joking with Arlen, my big mistake. I think the mistake on air hopefully was somewhat small, but the big mistake I made was believing anything Jordan Peterson ever posted or tweeted. And actually, to be fair, it's not really completely untrue. But what he wrote here is you didn't cancel any debt, you transferred funding. This is with regard to a brag tweet by Kamala Harris about all the student debt that she and Biden had canceled, mostly really Biden as president. And Peterson said, well, you didn't cancel it, but you transferred funding for it. And I assumed that meant, Arlen, that the debt was being paid off by taxpayers to at least some for-profit private student loan companies, loan sharks, if you will, as I like to call them. There are such lenders that prey on students. And I thought, well, and I should have looked deeper, and I did. And it was hard to get the information, but as far as I can tell, that is false. All the money, and by the way, Peterson doesn't say differently, all the money that is forgiven, all the debt that is being forgiven was owed to the federal government. So it's not as though for-profit loan sharks who, lend money at usurious rates to students are going to be getting taxpayer largesse. That is not the case. The money will only come from the debt. But that said, there's truth to what Peterson's saying in a way, because the money that the federal government lent to students that they were supposed to pay back, that they were, I guess, I don't know, that was assumed they would pay back, they won't pay back, which means ultimately this federal government debt will go up. Now, I think it's worth it. I think we should be making sure that students don't have enormous debts. But really, the best solution, in my view, Arlen, I like your thought, is to raise taxes on the financial services industry and other very profitable and really mostly useless industries, or even harmful ones, like, I think, debt servicers and the fossil fuel industry, among others. Raise their taxes, raise the taxes on the billionaire class, and we should be paying off our debt, not adding to it.
Yeah. First of all, for clarification, I'm not familiar with Dr. Jordan Peterson. Who is he?
He's a right-wing pundit. I don't even know if he's really a doctor. He wrote that. Maybe that's sort of a joke. But he's a right-wing guy. I think he's from Canada. He's done a lot on identity politics. He's very much of a kind of a transphobe and a trans baiter. And some people accuse me of having not as much sympathy for the trans community. So, if you think I'm being a hypocrite, that's fair. But that's one of his major issues. But one area where we're extremely different is he's not an economic justice guy. He mocks those of us like me, like you, who are trying to make society a little fair for everybody, especially workers. So he doesn't like the student debt cancellations that we have seen from the Biden administration, which really are making life a little more tolerable for millions of student debtors.
Yeah.
Peterson doesn't like it. And it is true that by forgiving the debt, it means that the national debt will rise unless some other steps are taken to make up the shortfall.
Actually, how I think it's almost criminal that American college students graduate with tons and tons and years of debt. I don't think that happens in Europe, or most countries are willing to help out or sometimes pay completely for a college education for their students. And here, to have years and years of oppressive debt is just not right. And I'm glad Biden is doing what he can. He should do more if he can, but at least we're starting to do something about it.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Arlen. There should be no debt associated with getting a college education or a graduate school education. I have made the point, and in fact, we were talking off air about Alan Hoffa because he's running for Monterey County Council. Alan Hoffa is a professor at Monterey, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Peninsula College. Is that right,
Yes.
Arlen?
Yes. So
he's a great Monterey City council member. Is he still on the council there? He was. I assume he is. And now he's running for county council against a friend of mine, Kate Daniels, whom I remember. We're not going to really spend a lot of time delving into that race, but I bring it up. I'm going to try to get a friend of Kate's on, though, and he may even be helping her with her campaign, Jordan, later this week. That said, I am a supporter of, for what it's worth, I don't live in the district, but for what it's worth, I do like Alan a lot and think because of his experience in government, he would be a good choice. So the reason I bring up Hoffa is he and I had a disagreement on air about student debt and about college payments. We didn't disagree really on the debt. We both agree you shouldn't graduate with debt, but we had different views on financing college education. Alan said that he thinks it should be free. If you get into a university or college, especially a state, and I don't know if he was talking about private, but certainly Cal, CSUMB, MPC, any of those Cal schools and any of the tiers, it should be free. You don't pay any tuition. I have a slightly different take. My view is that when you go to college, if you get a degree, you get a specific benefit to yourself. It helps you. Alan says, no, society benefits. I agree, society generally benefits, but not necessarily from someone who gets, say, a business degree and their focus is solely on enriching themselves. That may or may not lead to benefits for society. My view is because the individual who gets the degree or who goes to the school gets the specific benefit, whereas there's a generalized benefit to society. I like what I've never seen it implemented. It was discussed in Oregon. Pay it backwards for, say, 20 years after graduation. Whatever you earn, there's a 5 or 10%, probably 5% tax or charge on, and I would have it the take home, so not even the gross, but if you take home $50,000, you pay $2,500. If you take home $100,000 for 20 years. So at the end of 20 years, you're done. It's over. And if you don't work that whole period, you don't pay anything unless you have other income like from stocks, bonds, the like. But the more you make, the more you pay. So if you're somebody who starts a tech company that goes huge and you make $500 million, which does happen, Arlen, you know what? You might pay that year you might have to pay back, if I can do my math right, $2.25 million. Because $25 million would be 5% of $500 million. So you could afford it. You could easily afford it and would also probably pay for everyone else in your class. So that's the way I would finance it, because still the individual I got a great education. I benefited from that education much more than anybody. And I know Alan would say, no, but hell, you're doing this live stream. People benefit hugely from your live stream. Like they may not see it that way. Anyway, you go ahead, Arlen, in response.
Yeah, I'm glad we all agree that it is a benefit to society, I think, for people to have a higher education. But it doesn't bother me that they have to pay some of that money back, because they do benefit from it directly. While there's other people who have no interest in going to college and maybe want to become a plumber or a farmer or something like that, which is fine. So they shouldn't be burdened with paying for everybody else's college education, at least not too much. Although, like we say, it's a benefit to society in general. So what you're talking about, what Oregon is talking about, I think is reasonable as long as it's not too much.
Yeah. And of course, 5% per annum for a teacher would be far, far less than the debt burden that they're paying now if they had to borrow to pay for their college and graduate school education. But for a tech bro or a surgeon, that they'd be paying more. And I think there's no reason. In fact, it makes a lot of sense, because the tech bro or the surgeon is parlaying their education into a far higher salary than the teacher is. And also maybe we can argue which is better for society, but the teacher's giving back directly. So I like it personally.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no excuse for people to graduate and pay off their debts for 10, 20, 30 years and having it be a burden. That's absurd. So, we have to do something about that. It is way too much that we have now, and it should be, brought down by, some of the methods that you're talking about. So I think we are in agreement on that.
Yeah, no question, Arlen. I really appreciate it. By the way, again, you're watching and listening to Halitics with Hal and Arlen, and we really appreciate it. I do hope you'll subscribe. I do want to get those subscribers up. We're a little stagnant. I mentioned that last week, Arlen. A little disappointed. It's been stagnating. I'm not sure whether that's a testament to the quality of my show or something else. Let's hope I don't know what I hope it is. I just want it to change. So just go. I don't know the reason, but I hope it will change. I just wanted to just revisit this real quick. Go ahead, Arlen.
Yeah, I think that after this show, you may see a bump. That's just my prediction. You may have suddenly a larger viewership, but we'll see.
Well, just having you on should help. And then, of course, I just played the subscribe now button. Can you see that? Do you see the subscribe now button? I'm just going to play it a second time.
I do.
Nice.
I do.
Okay. So hopefully that will help. I wanted
to
just...
Excuse me, but you always post the phone number too, where people can call, and people ordinarily don't call lately. So I would encourage anybody who has an opinion out there. There's a phone number right in front of you. Give us a call and discuss whatever you want to discuss with us.
100%, Arlen. That's why I love having you on too, because we can bounce ideas off each other just like I can with callers if we have any. Just wanted to real quick on the consumer debt. The other reason, and this remains a valid critique of Biden's plan of paying off the debt. I'm good with it. I think we should do it. Of course, 100%, whatever he can do to make life a little easier for the student borrowers, I support. And I also understand there's a bit of a means test. In other words, high income grads aren't getting their loans forgiven, or at least not to the same degree, which is also a good thing. But I did note that it's kind of like they always give. This is why I am so frustrated with Democrats, Arlen. They give with one hand, they take away with the other. I made this point. The bankers, a lot of the credit card companies love this plan because by providing less debt or reducing the debt owed by students, that means they have more money available to pay them off. So I guess that's good, right? I mean, if you buy a TV set on credit, which you should never, ever, ever, ever do, go without the TV. But if you do, yeah, you should pay your credit card company back. But they charge such usurious rates. I'd love to see the administration go after them as well.
Well, we always know that somewhere along the way, the private sector will find a way to profit from anything the government does or anything that happens. So, that's just the way our system works.
Or works badly. Okay, let's get to the news of the day. Arlen, I'm not trying to say this to kind of embarrass you. It may come across like that. That's not the goal. You had opined maybe months ago that Trump was, I think, and if I get this wrong and I don't have the clip and I'm not going to play it, that Trump, you didn't believe would likely get the nomination. Now, I agree with you, and I still agree with your assessment. He probably won't become president again. I don't think he will. I think there's just too much toxicity there for a lot of reasons. I think people just will not, in the end, enough people will not vote for him over Joe Biden. But you had also indicated you didn't think Trump was going to get the Republican nomination. Obviously, we're not there. Are you revising that opinion a little bit?
Well, you probably would notice, Hal, if you look closely over the last few weeks, that he's slipping a little bit. He's not getting the large margins that he predicts or that pollsters predict. I think he's starting to lose some. A lot of people he'd probably lose a lot more if he got indicted on one of his felonies, and the polls show that too. And I think he gets crazier and more ridiculous all the time. And I think people are going to notice as we get closer to the election that this guy shouldn't even be close to the White House.
That's an interesting for you to say, Arlen, because more of the focus of media, as far as I can tell, and maybe I'm wrong, has been on Biden dropping out rather than Trump. You're saying you think it's more likely the other way, that in the end, that Biden should be dropping out because of his age, because he has a lot of senior moments. And you don't disagree with that. You don't dispute that at all. But it seems to me what you're saying is not really what the conventional wisdom is. You're saying it's Trump that we may see drop out even more so than Biden, or am I wrong?
Well, I don't know how it'll happen, but I just can't see Trump there at the very end. And if somehow he is like you, I don't think he could possibly, win the election, although our, election rules are kind of strange and anything is possible, of course. So, but I think from now to November, Trump is going to only get worse and people will see it more. And I think it's unlikely, although I don't know who would step in. People are not thrilled with Nikki Haley either. And as far as Trump goes, as far as Biden goes, I haven't heard anything in the last week or two so much about him dropping out. So maybe people are willing to accept him for now. Unless he,
it's up to him. In the end, no one can force him out. I don't think it's like a situation where you have somebody who's mentally ill and they have two family members sign a piece of paper and then you get a doctor in and the doctor certifies that they're non-compost menace and they can be put in a hospital or, restricted living environment. I don't think you can do that with president. And it seems abundantly clear, Arlen, that Biden has zero intent to drop out. So that may be why we're not hearing about it. I'm not really clear. I definitely know there was pushback. In fact, we have been hearing about it. I'll get to that in a little bit. I want to get to just talk a little bit more about Trump, Haley, but we'll get to what some of the comments about Biden and the challenges he's facing, given his apparent cognitive decline. You're saying Trump isn't doing as well as maybe he had been doing. So he wins South Carolina. Wins South Carolina by over 20 points, which to my way of thinking, is a pretty impressive margin, especially given the fact that his primary opponent is the former governor of the state. On the other side of the ledger is, yes, there were polls that showed him close to 30% ahead of Haley. He won just by a hair over 20. But I'm going to say with 60% of the vote against a relatively popular former governor, I don't see this as real strong evidence of Trump slipping.
Well, yeah, we'll know a lot more when we come to Super Tuesday in a few weeks, and we'll see how, Biden does. I mean, how Trump does against Haley. But another thing to consider is Biden is 81, Trump is 77. We've got a few more months until November. I think anything is possible health-wise for either one of them to have to drop out, because of their health. So, and I don't know that we've got the rules in place to take care of that, but that's a possibility.
We're going to get, one of the criticism we've had of Biden is that he refused the opportunity to have softball interview at the Super Bowl. So I know you were saying that you thought, we're not hearing as much about Biden being pushed to drop out. But this seemed to be a pretty significant concern among many people, that he should have done that interview.
What I've noticed is kind of interesting to me is I watch a lot of the late night comedians and all that, and they make a lot of fun of Trump, no question about it. So I think maybe to balance that out, they're starting to notice when Biden has trouble walking downstairs, or when he, is not walking very well, or he says something wrong. So, people are definitely aware of Biden's age, and it is a factor. So, we'll have to watch and see how it goes from now until November.
All right, back to the Republicans. I wanted to play this. And the reason I'm more focused on the Republicans, well, first of all, because, Trump is such a huge lightning rod. I don't feel like his age is an issue. Certainly those of us on the far left, like myself, are not happy about Biden, or not happy with Biden, although I've admitted that Biden has exceeded the extraordinarily low expectations I had for him in some areas, although in others he's done worse. So I don't know if on balance, because the recent foreign affairs issues have really weighed heavily on my willingness to consider him as my candidate in this election. But I want to stick with the Republicans because again, Trump's such a lightning rod, and he's perceived. I think there's feelings for and against Trump. Tell me if you think this is true, Arlen. Are much stronger than they are for people have for Biden. In other words, there are people who really do love Trump, and there are people who really, really hate Trump. I'm one of the few who don't have either emotion necessarily. Biden, I think people are more meh. Is that fair?
Maybe at this point. I don't think people are looking at the election that closely like we are. People who follow politics all the time, we're not, a lot of people aren't focused on that. But I noticed something though in the polls, that the exit polls in South Carolina, that there's a significant number of Haley voters who said they wouldn't support Trump under any circumstances. And I think, that's something to look at.
Yeah, I mean, he does have he's definitely turned a significant part of the party against him. I would say maybe the country clubbers are the ones who really have problems with him for a variety of reasons. Some maybe are not even bad reasons. Others, I think are. I mean, look, I can see you not voting for Trump, but if the reason you're not voting, I wouldn't vote for Trump. But if the reason you're not voting for Trump is because he's, say, against the war in Ukraine, that's not a good reason as far as I'm concerned. But there are Republicans who, neocon, neo-lib type Republicans. All right, I want to play this video here, Arlen, for you. This is, I want to know whether you agree with what Trump is saying here.
Tomorrow, South Carolina voters head to the polls with the state's Republican primary. Frontrunner Donald Trump is expected to easily take the win.
Right, let me just interrupt that. So you can see this is just before the primary, but I wanted to give the results, just set the table for what actually happened. after this video and then see whether you agree with what Trump says, predicting going forward. By the way, just to let the cat out of the bag, if anyone doesn't know, Haley is still running. She is not dropping out. She doesn't care. I mean, it was clearly a disappointing loss for her, I would have to imagine. Maybe not a little narrower than she feared, but still can't be good to lose your home state by 20 points.
Getting closer to securing the GOP nomination for president. Nikki Haley, however, insists she is not dropping out. Here's Rebecca Castor.
In South Carolina, former Governor Nikki Haley might be the home team, but she faces long odds in winning the state's primary over Donald Trump.
She's hurting the party, but I don't care. Let her run, because think of it, if she's not running, they're not talking about us.
The most recent poll numbers put Trump nearly 30 points ahead of Haley, but she insists she'll stay in the race even if she loses on Saturday.
Do we really want to go and be a country in disarray and a world on fire and have two candidates in their 80s?
So there she plays the age card, which, is pretty smart of her because she's not going after Trump on his policies, which would really irritate, I think, a lot of Republicans. But she didn't lose by the 28, but it wasn't that far removed from, it was clearly a blowout loss. Trump said she's hurting the party, but then he comes back and says, hey, I'm glad she's in it because they're talking about us every day. I like your reaction to that.
Well, one thing we have to consider is that from now until November, Trump is going to be in court a lot. He will be dealing with trials. He might get convicted of something. I mean, that's not going to be helpful for him. And people will notice it. And, and a lot of them have said if he does get indicted or guilty of something, of some felony, that they might reconsider voting for him. So, and then there's one other issue I think is interesting too, is, yeah, Nikki Haley right now is the second person in line, but if she isn't the one people want, who would run against Trump for the Republican nomination? I don't know.
Well, no one's going to run against Trump for the nomination. It's only whether he's pushed out, because everyone else has dropped out. Ramaswamy has dropped out. Chris Christie has dropped out. There was another, DeSantis has dropped out. So no one else is going to run. He'll be the nominee by almost, and the others who've dropped out have all endorsed him. None of them said, oh, well, we're going to endorse Haley. So unless, I just don't know what would happen. Just like she won't drop out despite getting thumped in primary after primary. It looks like Trump won't get dropped out even if he is indicted. I don't think there's a law that says you can't run for president from a prison cell.
Yeah, no question about it. Trump will stay on as long as he possibly can. But if he does something, horribly stupid or racist or whatever, and people think, hey, he needs to drop out or whatever, who would challenge him? That to me is interesting. I don't know how you'd figure that out.
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think Trump says absolutely outrageous things all the time, and it doesn't cause anyone to say he's got to drop out on the Republican side. And even there, Haley's first argument against Trump is, well, he's too old like Biden. She didn't bring up, all of the outrageous and really reckless, irresponsible things he says and his really bad behaviors and policy failings. She doesn't talk about any of those things. So, I don't see it happening, Arlen. That's why I'm a little perplexed why you think, because even if he gets indicted, even if he's stepped back by a judge, how he could still run, I believe. So I think he's going to run.
Oh, I think he's going to run. He's going to try to run, no doubt.
I think he's going to be the nominee. Is when I say he's going to run, he's going to be the Republican nominee.
Well, yeah, he likely will, but we don't know for sure. I think, a lot of things can happen. I see a lot of, symptoms of dementia in a lot of what he says. He's confusing things a lot. He says things that are totally not real. And, I think, a little senility is showing there. And I think it's only going to get worse. And, he said, just the other day, like yesterday, I think he upset a lot of people by what he said about black people, that they're supporting him because he got indicted. And, so they relate to him in that
So they
way.
relate to him
It's
because
offensive.
they've been arrested themselves.
Yeah, that's offensive to a lot of black people.
I hear you. I hear you, but it's offensive to a lot of people. But I'll bet there'll be some people who are going to relate. I really do. There are going to be people who are wrongly arrested who are going to say, "Yeah, I'll bet they got me, and I didn't do anything wrong, or or what I did shouldn't even be a crime, like for selling a little pot, and I got thrown in jail for that, or that kind of thing." And so they feel like the system is right. They're right. African American arrestees and who have a record who for not doing anything really that I would even characterize as wrong. They may well have some empathy for Trump, even though many of the things he's done are very wrong.
Well, I don't think he's going to win because of people who've been in trouble with the law. I mean, that's just not going to happen, obviously. So, he's going to offend people down the line as he campaigns. I'm quite certain. And, once people, as we get closer to the election, people are going to really pay attention. Yeah.
All right, I want to play this. Let's see. This is from, and I mentioned, Arlen, there was an issue with Trump, not Trump, sorry about that, folks, Biden, where Biden didn't accept the interview, right, to the free B interview. Do you have it is hard for me, honestly, to see how that wasn't a mistake. I really have to say. It seems clear to me if you're going to get free attention and you decline it, the only reason you would is because you're afraid you'll really look bad. And if that's the case, that's something for them to be worried about. Let's see if we can play a little bit of this video.
An enormous audience. Not quite moon landing numbers, but man, it was pretty close in the end. The president declined an interview that would have aired during the pregame coverage. Marianne was turning down the opportunity to appear before so many people, even though the height of the audience wasn't in the pregame coverage. But was it good strategy or was it a missed opportunity?
124 million people tuned in to see the game, Taylor Swift, the ads, halftime, and not Joe Biden.
Was it a good or a bad idea?
That's just not what people want to
It's
say.
just not what.
I mean, it's like she was so. Could she have been more obvious? She's like 124 million people, Taylor Swift, free interview. And he's like, good idea. Like, I mean, was he? I'm like, wow, that. And I'm not a network TV host, or I'm not a Fox. Well, that's ABC. Obviously, she's saying it was a terrible idea. Is she not?
Well, I think what's going on, and unfortunately, I think the reason was because Trump was worried he might make a mistake or look stupid. Or
Biden. I'm sorry. You made the same mistake I did. I put Trump's name in your head. It was Biden. Just to be clear for our listeners, viewers, we're talking about the decision by Joe Biden not to appear in a pre-Super Bowl kickoff interview, and whether and how big a mistake that was.
Yeah, he would get nothing but softball questions, Biden. And so I think he's just scared that something, his handlers may have said, don't take any chances. You might, say something wrong or look stupid in some way. And, it doesn't make any sense because, he had a lot of audience and he's going to be asked very easy questions. So it's kind of strange, but I think the most logical thing I can come up with is they're scared. They're scared.
Right, let me posit this to you. Okay. His handlers, his team, his reelection team says, we don't want to risk it. You're in your dotage. You're likely to say something stupid. You'll get the teams confused. You'll piss, you'll say something about Jason Kelsey and, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or something. So that's what they're saying. I'm not saying, but that's what they're saying to him. If that's your take, if your take is my guy is so gaga at this point that he can't handle this interview, and if that's correct, then should he not, as you've indicated, withdraw?
Well, that's a good question, Hal. And, I personally wished he wasn't in there. I think it would be better if we had somebody that was younger, stronger, that could take on Trump. But, then you have complications. If he doesn't run, then you have to go up to Kamala Harris, who is seemingly unpopular. I don't know why, but she seems to be unpopular. And you'll have a fight among people who want to take over. So, maybe they're figuring, hey, Biden's just going to be okay compared to Trump, who's going to look horrible. So you might as well stick with, somebody just like in 2020, it was the same kind of situation. He was just a lot better choice, a lot safer.
He was acceptable. He was the safe choice. So you're seeing an image from this interview. Let's play a little more because I'm really fascinated by this discussion. I just want to say, Arlen, I think there's zero excuse. Whoever made this decision made a terrible, terrible mistake. I have seen Biden do interviews lately. I've seen him on TV. He's a little weaker. He's definitely lost 5 miles off his fastball. I don't care. He's not that bad. He really isn't. He's just not that. He makes his points. He's able to clarify what he's trying to say. There's no, and if he weren't, he should not run. But he's still capable of winning this race. I think he probably will win the race. I think this hurts him and makes it less likely he'll win it. It's crazy. It's inexcusable. It's wrong.
People want to say.
President Obama did it every time he was asked. So it is a great opportunity. But I think the Biden people know the more you see Joe Biden, the more you question whether he is up to the job, and they weren't going to put him in that situation.
All right. So I'm going to stop it right there. That seems to be, I guess, the most persuasive argument that doesn't really say Biden shouldn't be president. It's more like, well, he's struggling. He can probably handle a few very limited opportunities to display himself, but we just want to keep them as few as possible.
Yeah, I think it was a mistake. I think he would have done all right. I can't imagine anything terrible he would have said, but I guess they're just very cautious and, don't want to take that chance. Which, all of a sudden I'm thinking about, will there be debates if it's Trump versus Biden? And that would be very fascinating. And I don't know what would happen or if either of them would even volunteer to do that.
I mean, that's a great question, Arlen. I got to believe the answer is that as far as Trump's concerned, he will want to do debates.
You will want to? I would
think Trump would want debates. Do you disagree with that?
I'm not sure. I think, he certainly stayed away from all the Republican debates of late, but going against, Biden.
But see, it makes sense for him to stay out of the Republican debates because the only thing they could do for him is hurt him because he had very sizable leads. But he's within the margin of error in most polls. It's far from clear he's winning. He's going to win this race against Biden. I presume he's saying to himself, I'm definitely look more vigorous by comparison to Biden. I'm quicker than he is. I can tell a few, my patented insults and hopefully they'll go over well. I mean, if I were Trump's campaign manager, I'd tell him he should push for debates.
Yeah, it's a chance, but I think, it might be a good idea. If Biden could just hold his own and not say anything stupid and, be reasonable. And he's certainly a very knowledgeable, intelligent person. And I don't think that's completely gone away just because he's gotten older. So it would be they would be fascinating debates, no question.
I have to say, I really wasn't paying a lot of attention in 2020, but in 2016, I thought the debates with Hillary Clinton actually did help Trump a little bit. If you look at the numbers, I think people had relatively low expectations for him, and he did well enough. He certainly, on some issues, I think, especially trade, made a good impression, and I think it helped him. And I think the polls, if you look at the post-debate polls, that will bear out what I just said.
I just can't help thinking about him, walking behind Hillary and, doing stupid things that other people don't do. But yeah, American people are funny. You just don't know what they're going to respond to. They may, find him doing something, outrageous that they like. It's impossible to really know.
You're watching Halitics. Arlen Grossman with us. It's an Arlen Monday. So you brought this to my attention, Arlen. I always try to give you topics since you're so grateful. You have the grace
I'm
to come on this live stream. So Project Center, top 10 stories. Corporate abuse and environmental harm dominate. No surprises. Corporations own major media. So, of course, they're not going to want to highlight how they're hurting everybody and taking advantage of us. And environmental harm is very depressing. It's not good for ratings in particular. And again, the corporations are doing the environmental harm, so they're not going to want us to know about it. It's really corporate abuse. This pattern signals a deeper truth about economics and human survival. I'm always interested in deeper truths. Arlen, before we get into at least one of those stories, actually I have two that I wanted to discuss. Why did this jump out at you? Why did you want to talk about Project Censored?
Well, every year I want to see what they have to say, because I think it's, useful, because, we know that the major media does not cover things fairly all the time, and there is some bias. So, to me, it's fascinating what they consider to be, underrated stories, or, that don't really get covered, and all that kind of thing. So, I find it interesting, and I watch it and look for it every year. And, I just find it very useful.
Did you learn about this? Because this has been going on for at least 20 years. I think they first came out 2002, 2003. But did you first learn of this from the Peter B. Collins show? I know I did.
Oh, I don't remember the first time that I noticed it, but I've always followed it, like I said, and it's certainly worth looking at.
Well, Peter B., of course, was one of the hosts on the old KRXA 540 AM in Monterey, where I got my radio start. And he always discussed this. So I was wondering if that was, I remember him very much focusing on the Project Censored
story. Is he
stories.
still around, Hal? Is he still around?
Peter B., I believe he is definitely still alive. If you're asking if he's still alive, I don't mean to chuckle, but yeah, I mean, he's on Facebook. I don't think he's maybe a few years older than I am, but not many. So I hope he's still going strong. He did kind of like what I do now for a while, but then stopped. It's tough, it's tough to build an audience. And, I think he's on radio, and he may still be doing DJ work in San Francisco, which is what he did for many years. He probably is a little older than I am. I think he dates back to the 70s in radio. Maybe I'm wrong. So he would be a little older than I am. All right. So this was the number one story, at least at the top of the chart, the list there. We have made the planet inhospitable to human life. Very, very depressing. Arlen, where do you want to go? Do you have any thoughts? I circled a few things. I highlighted what I thought was really important. I don't know if you have any add-ons to this.
Yeah, certainly environmental issues are something that don't always get covered like they should. Their number one story is forever chemicals in rainwater pose a global threat to human health. So that's certainly important. In many areas inhabited by humans, the plastic type contamination levels in rainwater, surface water, and soil often greatly exceed the strictest international guidelines. So that doesn't sound good. And that should be something that I think should be better covered.
Yeah, they mentioned that there were a couple of outlets, I think USA Today and one other, that did discuss this story. But frankly, I was unaware of it, and I'm not surprised. And I always wondered, because we talk about how the water in Flint, right, it's so toxic coming out of the Flint River and all that, and people, you can't drink it. But the water that comes from the sky now, Arlen, that's how bad we have tainted our once perfect, nothing's perfect, but our once beautiful blue and green marble is every day a little more poisonous, a little more destructive to all life.
I'd be curious, Hal, if you know this particular fact, which I didn't. Anyway, story number 3 is toxic chemicals continue to go unregulated in the United States. And one example would be asbestos. One of the most widely recognized toxic substances is still legal in the United States, more than 30 years after the EPA tried to have it banned. And I wasn't aware of that. That's crazy.
So you're saying, see, I wonder if there aren't state regulations that cover this, though. I don't know. I certainly didn't know that. My understanding, when we had some work had to be done in our house, we had some flooding. We had to have the walls. We had to have the ceilings basically pulled down and then rebuilt.
Yeah.
One of the concerns was, and that could add to the cost, there might be asbestos given the age of the flooring. Because I say ceiling, but it was the flooring of the second floor, which is, of course, the ceiling of the first floor. There was no asbestos, but the flooring was 40 years old, and they were still using asbestos, or maybe it's even older than that. Maybe it was this house. My house is now nearly 100 years old, 95 years old. So my question, Arlen, is, not my question to you, but why I'm questioning that is what I was told by the flooring guys is newer floors don't have asbestos. They don't use it in the housing business, in the housing industry anymore in Maryland. So that made me think it's illegal, but maybe it's not illegal. It's just it's either more expensive or it's too risky or there's other factors involved.
Well, yeah, there should be no excuse for something that unhealthful to still be legal. I mean, there's just absolutely no reason for it. So,
I
there's
want
a
to
lot
say,
of things.
Arlen, when I read this story about these chemicals and how there doesn't appear to, and they don't get a lot of media attention, if any, and they don't get any attention from our politicians, they don't talk about it. It makes me just think, again, why devote so much time and energy to go after Donald Trump when the Democrats aren't protecting us either? When either way, we're flushing our own future down the toilet, regardless of whether we elect Trump or Biden.
Well, I think the Democrats would definitely do more about this issue than the Republicans would, and probably do already. I live in California, as you used to do, and all the time I see these signs on everything. This is a possible cancer-causing substance, and you got to be careful. And I have a feeling that in the red states, you won't see those kind of stickers. So I think Democrats do care about this issue a lot more and are probably doing more, about it, but probably not enough.
Yeah, I am less sanguine. I feel like even the progressives in general only talk about issues when they have to, when they're pushed to, not when they learn of a problem, unless they can use that issue to their political advantage, to the extent that it's not helpful to them politically. And we'll get into a second story about that in a moment. But I thought this was really relevant also. This relates to what you were just talking about, the chemicals in our environment that we put there. The companies have kept them hidden. So they knew about these problems. Just like ExxonMobil back in the 70s knew that it was burning up our planet and actually used its expertise, its knowledge to increase its profits, not to reduce its drilling, its extraction, its production, but to figure out ways that it could profit from the harm it was causing.
Well, that's the problem with our political system. I agree with you. The Democrats should be doing a lot more and should be getting into more and more issues that are important. But, Democrats are afraid to offend their corporate sponsors, their donors. And that's the problem with our political system. Money rules. If you have the money, you're going to get what you want. And the Democrats realize that. They don't want to lose any of their donors, so they have to be careful about what they want to do. And not only that, I think it's tough for the Democrats to do anything because they have to bump against the Republicans who will not let them do anything. They will try to block anything that Biden or the Democrats try to do that would be good.
It's true. I'm with you. I hear you. All right. I wanted to show this. This was something you actually posted. I'm going to throw your own meme right in your face. Not really in your face, but I thought this was interesting. I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but I'll explain my concern with this. So let me share it right here. This is something I believe you posted this. Did you not, Arlen?
I did not, but I saw it.
Oh, you did not. Oh,
Yeah.
I apologize then.
Okay.
That's fine. We can still discuss it. I don't know why I thought it was from you. I
Well, it was in the
apologize.
thread that I was involved in.
But I should have looked more carefully. So here you have a Roman emperor who is apparently a pretty erudite, well-written, literate emperor. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them knows anything about the subject. I don't think that's completely false, right? I mean, if you don't know what you're talking about, then your opinion probably isn't worth very much. But the problem I have with this post is that it's an elite. It's the most elite person there is, the emperor. And he's kind of dismissing the opinions of other people. He says they don't know anything about the subject, but it's easy for him to say, well, you don't know anything. You don't know anything about statecraft. You don't know anything about why I had to execute those 5,000 prisoners. You don't know anything about why I had to go into your village and, put everyone under house arrest. So it's easy, or torture people. It's easy for elites who do know a lot or at least appear to be in a position to know a lot to tell everyone that they don't, everyone else that they don't. I just will give one quick anecdote. I remember getting into a dispute with somebody, a friend of mine, about Larry Summers, who was, I believe, was he Treasury Secretary? He had a high-level post in, I believe, was it Obama or Clinton? In Obama's administration. And he is a big pro-free trade guy. And I pointed out that to this friend of mine that free trade was harming working people and they were against it, and that there were a lot of, intelligent people who were against free trade. And he's like, well, Larry Summers was the president of Harvard, so he knows better than everyone else. And I said, I think a lot of working people know the harm that's caused by trade. And he said, I don't care if you have 10,000 working people. I would take Larry Summers' opinion over all of theirs. And I'm sure if you're talking about supply and demand curves and marginal return equals marginal cost and all that, yeah, Summers is going to be able to discourse much more eloquently. But Summers doesn't give a crap. His job isn't on the line. He's not losing. Nobody's offshoring the job of president of Harvard. So this is why I have a problem with this kind of elitism, because I feel like it's used over and over to dismiss the opinions of those criticizing the large and in charge folks.
Well, what I would say, Hal, is that there's certainly a lot of ignorance in this country. There's a lot of things that people don't know, and they should, ideally. And then you've got the problem, especially now, of social media and all these other things, where a lot of lies are purposely put out there, and people will believe them. And, there are possible, I heard some good idea, I think, about how you deal with artificial intelligence and social media, so-called facts. And that is, well, as far as artificial intelligence, that it shouldn't be allowed in political ads, which, hey, that sounds like a great idea to me. Somebody shouldn't be able to put something that, Biden is supposed to have said that he didn't. I mean, that was false. That's certainly wrong. So I think I would hope that there'll be some kind of effort to do something about that.
So can you elucidate? I'm a little bit confused here. Artificial intelligence is just basically computers aggregating a lot of information and then putting it together in sort of bite-sized chunks, as I understand it. So you're saying you don't want that being used in advertising?
No, that's not the problem. Now, the problem is artificial intelligence can change, make somebody say something that they didn't say. They'll put it up there with that person's face, put the words in that aren't his or hers. That's the problem. I think if there's going to be false information and lies done by artificial intelligence, and they're getting pretty good at it, we have
wouldn't that subject, though, the advertising company that put that out there, or the campaign, to libel and slander violation laws?
No, I don't. I think when it comes to elections and what you say during an election. And I think it's all free speech. So, nobody's going to get in trouble.
I don't
for
think
that.
you can deliberately lie or lie with reckless abandon, even when it comes to a candidate who's obviously a public person. But you can't just simply say, for example, you couldn't say, if you were Joe Biden, you couldn't say Donald Trump has been convicted of child molestation, unless I don't think he has. I'm not aware that he ever has. You can't say that because it's simply not true. He couldn't say, if you're Donald Trump, you couldn't say, I have on credible information, Joe Biden killed a man when he was 19 years old. You can't say things like that.
Well, things are said like that all the time, Hal, and they get away with it. So
Are they? Give me an example, because I'm not aware of that.
Well, Trump is always saying things that aren't true.
Well, did he? He didn't say Joe Biden killed anybody. I mean, what is? You got I mean, there's got to be some scintilla of something there, or you are subject to defamation. You can be sued for defamation. I'm not saying. And he was, right? E. Jean Carroll sued him for defamation, and she won $83 million.
Yeah, but that was, a civil case. I don't know that that's, a criminal case. So I think it's worth, what you're saying is worth investigating more. Yeah, if there are actual lies put out there, is there any consequence for them? I don't think there is, but, I think we should look at it and see.
Well, there may not be a criminal. It may not be considered a crime to lie, and there may be good. Well, except under oath, right? You can't lie under oath, but otherwise, it may not be a crime to lie. And maybe it should. Maybe in certain circumstances, it should be. I'm not sure.
I think you can find many, many instances of candidates lying about lots of things during every election and getting away with it. So, because we have this thing called free speech.
Right. But if you're lying about, oh, yes, I created more jobs than any other president, that may be a lie, but you're not really defaming anyone. So it's hard. You can't be sued for that. So you're saying that should be a criminal charge. There should be subject to a criminal charge for that.
I think it's the other side that is responsible for saying, hey, this person lied. That's not true. And, it depends on how well they do at, coming back from those kind of statements. So, it's really the job of the other side to
police. Yeah. Well, these are tough issues. I mean, I'm not so big on using big sticks to try to bludgeon people into doing the right thing. I think there must be better ways to do it, because also a lot of times people make statements that are arguably true, right? I mean, you could say, well, we created more jobs than any other administration. And then when you're called on it, you're like, well, yeah, we did create more jobs, but we also lost a lot of jobs. So in the end, it was kind of a mix, right? I mean, you come up with some excuse. And I think voters kind of know. They can often sniff the BS. I hope that we're not that incapable of weighing and judging between different candidates. That said, yes, voters have repeatedly made choices I think are bad ones. So maybe they're not.
Yeah, the perfect example, I believe, is Donald Trump.
I think
people that believe what he says and are okay with what he says, when what we know what he says are usually a lie, and he's very dangerous for the country, but people will accept it.
I think I can come up with examples of elections where the voters made, in my view, bigger mistakes than electing Donald Trump in 2016, because he didn't win in 2020, so you can't say they were wrong there. In the end, Biden won. I think voting for Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders was one of the most awful decisions a voter could have ever made in my lifetime. There was such an obvious difference between the candidates. Bernie Sanders has been, throughout his career, pro-person, pro-working people, not as pro-peace as I would have liked, but far less pro-war than Hillary Clinton. He's also demonstrated far more sincerity. To me, there's many, many, many more miles between Bernie and Hillary than between Hillary and Trump. I think there were arguments, certainly arguments why you shouldn't vote for Hillary that I was persuaded by well, I made them. So I persuaded myself. But I don't think there were any arguments really that held any water that Hillary was a better choice than Bernie.
Yeah, well, you know how
I just give you another election, I think, where really the voters made a worse decision than when they voted for Trump over Hillary. I think Ronald Reagan was a very, very bad, very, very damaging president. I understand why people voted for him. He was somewhat avuncular. I think it's very hard for me to see arguments that hold water that he was a better choice than either Carter or Mondale, who I think were both pretty decent Democratic choices. So those are two I'll give from my lifetime.
Yeah,
and I'll give you Al Gore versus HW or versus W. That was a terrible, terrible decision by the voters.
It was, and I agree with you on all of those things. I think Bernie lost because he didn't have the power that Hillary has. Hillary had accumulated, a lot of debt from other people. As far as she had all the power and the clout, and Bernie did not. And that's very unfortunate. Another thing to consider is some of our elections have been maybe questionable, like Gore versus Bush that you just mentioned in 2000. And the Supreme Court actually decided that election. And you have, other elections in which, it's questionable whether they're legitimate or not. So, our political system is kind of messed up in a lot of ways. We've had a couple people actually become president when they've had much less votes, the popular vote, and that's inexcusable as far as I'm concerned.
Here's another unreported story. Arl, I want to get to this, and then I guess we're already just at the 1 hour mark. Wow, we went quickly, and I took up more of the talking time. I'm sorry about that. I thought this was very interesting. Unions were successful when they had a chance to be in elections in 2022 to unionize, and those gains, to the extent that there were gains, were driven by workers of color. I was really fascinated by this. I don't know, did this speak to you at all, Arlen? Did you notice this story when you were reading the article?
I did. I think it's very important. I think it's really good that unions are looked on more favorably now than they have been for many decades, and I hope that continues because working people need to have collective bargaining, and they need to have an organization behind them to go up against these billionaire corporations. So I think it's an important story, and I hope the unions continue to grow much more than they have now, because they used to be very powerful in this country, and those were times when economically our country was doing really great.
Yeah, no question about it. We don't see much about labor in our newspapers today, even so-called progressive or maybe anyway Democratic newspapers like the New York Times do not discuss labor with nearly the amount of time they don't devote nearly enough space to labor issues. I thought this was a really interesting reason why we don't learn much about the increasing visibility and importance of Black workers in the labor movement is because both parties use identity to divide the electorate rather than to unite it. And when you see Black and white workers uniting for better working conditions, that is the kind of coalition building that the duopoly politicians don't like. They are trying to divide working people and the reason, Arlen, is if you looked at, is because they both get money from the corporations you were just talking about. They don't want, because their funders, their financiers don't want working people to unite in support of better working conditions. They don't want that. So they're not going to tell you. Well, guess what? Black workers are leading the struggle in unionization. They're part of there's the working class, and whites and blacks are together. And instead, they want to say, "Oh, look at these deplorables who are voting for Donald Trump, not, oh, look at these working people joining together, demanding a better life for themselves.
Yeah, well, we both agree on that, Hal. I think it should be much more about working people versus corporations rather than
Black versus white,
black against white and brown and all this identity politics,
and women versus men, and
yeah.
Arlen, that's it for me, man. I made my points. You gave me the opportunity to do that. I appreciate it. What do you want to? What were your closing words?
No, I think I got everything out that I wanted to say, and we had some, I hope, enlightening discussions, and I'm sure we'll continue to have that in the future. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it's my pleasure. You have a great afternoon, since it is now afternoon on the Central. Arlen, I mean, I'm gonna have to tease you about this. You can't get on before 11 a.m. I mean, I thought like seniors, as we get older, we sleep less. We wake up earlier. Like my mother-in-law, well, she goes to bed at like 7:30. She's usually up about 7:30. So I'm like, are you like a night owl? I mean, I've always been a morning person. I remember I did the morning show at 6 a.m. You couldn't have done that, right? That wouldn't have been, you would have been like, forget that.
No, I am not a morning person now. I'll admit it. I stay up late at night and I have trouble, functioning in the morning, and that's just the way I am. I think, it works fine when I'm on the East Coast with you, but
it does. And it's fun. It's just, I prefer, it's more just I'm being selfish because I like to go in the morning, or at least at noon, morning your time. What about, are you and your wife in sync on when you get up?
No. She has different rhythms that I do. Let's say she's more of a, she goes to bed earlier and gets up earlier, and I'm the other way around. So, but
was it tough when you were teaching? Because you were a teacher, right? That was your career?
Yes.
So you'd have to get up early.
Well, I do what I have to do, Hal. And there are times now, I do things, I have to get up early for doctor appointments or exercise classes, things like that. And I'll do it, but it's just not my preference.
I understand, Arlen. I get it. The kids you'll get up for, but not for Hal. I understand. I can survive that. Well, hey, I'll see you next week. Say again?
This time works for me.
And me too. All kidding aside, me too. 11 seems late to me, but then but you know what? I like it because now I have more time to prepare. And this morning I went to the doctor's. I couldn't have done that if I had my noon start time. So it all worked out. All right. So I'll see you next week. Have a great week. And everyone else, please tune in tomorrow. And hopefully Arlen will too. And please click like, please click subscribe. God, you got to click subscribe. All right. That's it for me. Have a great day.
All right. Take care.